I was just still thanking the leadership for the recognition by inviting us to come and address this very important topic, a challenge of funding disparities in education. Program Director, I know the term that is critical here is disparities. And I know one cannot address properly the topic like this one that have been provided by the leadership without first addressing the overall disparities that prevail in South Africa. I say so because school funding disparities are a reflection of the general disparities in the education, in the allocation of resources in society generally. It's not a matter that is peculiar to education, but it does tell you there is still something not correct in the way we allocate resources. As my address to this seminar today is premised on what the term disparities mean, what constitutes disparities in the allocation of resources, and how those disparities come about in our society. Because we can't take for granted that there's disparities without understanding what it means. But the purpose of my presentation today is to address this seminar, is to provide a general overview of the funding of education and financing of schools with the aim of highlighting the challenge of funding disparities in the country that we have. The mandate of the Department of Education, as you all know, is to provide equitable access to quality basic education for all children of compulsory school-going age. I listened earlier the presentation that was made by a colleague, presenter from UNISA, who presented online. And I did raise with Mr. Ngobese to say this issue of online schooling vis-a-vis UNISA and UCT, those are two institutions that have started this process of developing material on online schooling. To say maybe there will need to be a conversation between ourselves because UNISA is supposed to be providing a research output. That is their role, like all other higher education institutions. So we need to have an engagement on that, whether what they are coming up, is it part of research output or is the actual implementation of online education. Now, our mandate is founded on the following legislation, which we think I'm not going to bore and repeat here. The Employment of Educators Act, which provides a framework for ensuring quality education and maintaining effective school governance in South Africa. The National Education Policy Act 27 of 1996, that regulates ensuring quality, equal access to quality education for all from a national perspective, which aims to provide a framework for the organization, governance, and funding of education. As the KwaZulu-Natal Department of Education, we are guided by the mandate, vision, strategy of the Department of Basic Education, because we take our tune from basic education. This mandate requires the Department of Education to provide necessary and adequate funding to all schools across the province in line with the provisions of the Constitution, the Public Finance Management Act, the South African Schools Act, and other relevant prescripts. But I'm mentioning this because they are the key guiding legislative frameworks that we have as far as the issue of funding is concerned. Now, in order to deliver on the mandate, the department has an obligation to facilitate quality teaching and learning in a conducive classroom environment every day through following key objectives, or through the following key objectives. That one, to provide learning and teaching support materials, to build and maintain schools, to ensure effective administration and management of education. I will skip this, but what I would have wanted to say from a research perspective, from an academic perspective, academics have started to engage with what they called transformative constitutionalism, where they try and talk, because they seem to believe that when you have a constitution, a new constitution, like in our case in 1996, they believe that that constitution is transformative. But when you go deeper, and these academics have started to say there's a need for a change. But the question is, change what? Change from what? Those are questions and issues that we need to deal with. Because the tendency is to associate the new constitutional order with transformation, which one can argue and say it has not always been the case that when we have a new constitutional order, then it is implied that there is transformation. Can we proceed? The question that remains to be asked is that, what is it that remains unchanged in the way we fund education? I'm just saying, the more we think we are changing, the more we remain unchanged. Former Chief Justice Paslang, I'm sorry to bore you with these things that they have said, these academics. He says, one of the central tenets of transformative constitutionalism is a commitment to substantive equality and improving socio-economic conditions. You cannot say that you are transforming without ensuring that the socio-economic conditions of people, of citizens, are changing. He says it is no surprise that perhaps the biggest obstacle to attaining a truly transformative constitutionalism is continuing disparities of wealth and power that prevail our society. There are still disparities of wealth and power. They are there, they are a fact. We still have two systems of education in the country's effect. The education for the rich and the education for the poor. It is a fact, it's still there. Hence, we use this quintile system to try and redress and correct that. But what we're trying to do is to try and do this thing. The reality is we still have two systems of education. When the colleagues were presenting earlier, the cases of sexual abuse of learners in schools, they are not, or they do happen, but they are not common in ex-models schools. They do happen, but they are more common in our schools where we are. But why is it happening in our schools? It has to do with what one presenter was talking about, respect. To what extent do we respect ourselves? To what extent do we respect our child? Because we know if it is a white parent, I'm sorry to use that language, maybe you may get to court. You may be arrested quickly. With us sometimes, I'm not saying always, the issue of a teacher who has raped or abused a child tends to be a matter for negotiations, discussed. Try and have a settlement. I was once, when I was still young, still a teacher, appointed to preside in a matter in Umlazi of a teacher who had raped a child. The matter kept on dragging now every time we scheduled the hearing. Why? Because the parents and the teacher had settled that the parent paid lobola and the child was taken away. The teacher paid lobola and the learner was taken away. So the learner never came to testify. That was our problem. So I unfortunately ended up dismissing the charge because there was no one to testify. It's not about no one coming, it's about the disparities of wealth and power that prevail in our society. So that is a challenge we have. One of the former Chief Justices also, there was the speech by Justice Langa was 2006. Recently, 2023 November, former Justice Mufweng, when presenting or delivering a public lecture on SAFM public lecture on transformative constitutionalism, he started to describe it as a social and economic revolution that is needed in our society if we are to deal with the disparities that prevail in our society. Langa further says the Constitution is a bridge between the past of a deeply divided society characterized by strife, conflict, untold sufferings, and injustice, and a future founded on the recognition of human dignity, democracy, and peaceful coexistence, and the development of developmental opportunities for all South Africans, irrespective of color, race, belief, and sex. Now, we look at the historical bridge, you still have people on one side of the bridge and the others on the other side of the bridge. That is a racial divide that we still have in our society, which we must deal with through funding. We said earlier, one of the presenters said, this is the mother of all professions. If we don't fund education equitably, we still have this bridge. That is a problem. As far as the topic that I've been given to address today, that is the challenge of school funding disparities in South Africa, the context in which we fund schools still remains the same as the one already depicted above, which is not different from the way we used to fund education in the past. This context needs to change. We still fund education on the basis of past divided society, namely use the quintile system. We are trying to redress with the quintile system because we redirect resources more to the poor schools. We are trying our best, but is it the best method we are using? That is a question that we need to ask. I've already said that what I define as the disparities as meaning uneven distribution, provision, and allocation of resources in the society. Maybe we need to ponder at this point and ask ourselves the question, has anything changed? What has changed in the manner we fund education from the one we used to over the past? If nothing has changed, we must ask ourselves what we have benefited from the new constitutional order over the past 30 years. I'm not trying to imply we have not benefited, but I'm saying these disparities still suggest there is a lot that needs to be done. Sources of funding education. Funds are voted in terms of the Division of Revenue Act, the DORA as abbreviated. We seek to ensure equitable distribution of revenue among national, provincial, and local spheres of government. So there are three main sources from which we get our funding. It's equitable share, educational conditional grants, school fees and donations. That's the source from which we fund education. The basis of the equitable share allocation is according to provincial population. I think I'm trying to say the census that is conducted after every 5 years informs what gets allocated to each province. Now, what is unfortunate with us from the latest census is that, is in 2022, we came again as second after Gauteng as KZN in terms of the population. But when it comes to the learner population, if we go to the next, because we're at 12 million vis-a-vis 16 million, which is Gauteng population. But in terms of the learner population, we are 2.6 million learners. A number of schools in KwaZulu-Natal is 5,872. When we find, we also consider the curriculum needs, where we want to transform the curriculum, and funding distributed among these 12 districts, if we move. Once we have received the funding, which is voted to us as a department, currently 62 billion, it goes for administration, that is appointment of personnel. It goes for public ordinary schools, where we find many teachers, and the majority of the budget goes towards funding the salaries of teachers. There's money that goes towards Program 3, which is independent schools. Then for Program 4, public special schools, ECD from Program 5, infrastructure, Program 7 will be examinations and related services. So this is where our money goes. I've said we get a budget, a total budget of 62 billion as a department. That is how it is utilized. 2 billion is for administration, operational costs. 50 billion is for public ordinary schools, which is salaries of teachers in the main and some other staff members. 85 million is for independent schools, which we allocate through norms and standards. Public special schools is 1649, because we have 73 public special schools in the 75 actually in the province. But their staffing, appointment of teachers there also comes from the COE budget. Then there's 3 billion for infrastructure, for building schools, in maintenance and all that. And examination is 3 billion, so the total is that one.